Have you ever wondered what happens in those bright fluorescent aisles of Walmart after midnight? When the shoppers leave and the lights dim, something sinister seems to linger, something that doesn't belong. At first glance, Walmart is just another big box store. It's where we grab groceries, stock up on household essentials, or hunt for deals during Black Friday madness. But beneath its cheerful facade lies a darker side, a side whispered about in hushed tones by employees, customers, and even paranormal investigators. Walmart may seem ordinary, but it has become infamous for strange occurrences over the years. From unexplainable disappearances to chilling ghost sightings, these massive stores scattered across America have earned a reputation as hotspots for the bizarre and terrifying. Some say it's the sheer size of the buildings, the endless aisles stretching into shadows, that makes them feel so unsettling. Others believe there's something more unnatural at play. Stories abound of security cameras capturing inexplicable movements, eerie encounters with shadowy figures lurking between shelves, and objects moving on their own when no one's around. Employees have reported hearing disembodied voices calling their names while working late shifts. Customers claim they felt an overwhelming sense of dread walking through certain sections of the store, only to flee without explanation. And then there are the urban legends, tales passed down from one generation of Walmart workers to the next, that refuse to die. Tonight, I'm going to take you deep into this hidden world of fear. These aren't fictional tales. These are real stories shared by real people who experience things they can't explain, and likely never will. We'll explore 5 true Walmart horror stories that will send shivers down your spine, and make you question whether you'll ever step foot inside one again. So turn off the lights, grab your headphones, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. Because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at Walmart the same way again. Let's dive in. Story number 1, the Phantom Cart Pusher. It was a quiet night at the Walmart Supercenter in a small rural town. The kind of place where everyone knows each other, and nothing exciting ever happens. Or so they thought. Sarah, a 24-year-old cashier, had been working the late shift for months now. She didn't mind it too much. The solitude gave her time to think, listen to music, or catch up on podcasts while scanning groceries for the occasional straggler. The clock struck 11:45 p.m., and the store was nearly empty. Most customers had already left, leaving behind only a few scattered carts and the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Sarah leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone as she waited for the last shopper to check out. It was just another ordinary night, or so she believed. As Sarah glanced up from her screen, something caught her eye, a shopping cart slowly rolling toward her lane. At first, she assumed it was one of the overnight stalkers playing a prank. But as the cart drew closer, she realized there was no one pushing it. Her heart skipped a beat. "Hello," she called out hesitantly, her voice echoing through the deserted aisles. No response. She shook her head, trying to rationalize what she was seeing. Maybe someone had pushed it earlier, and it was simply coasting due to momentum. That made sense, until she heard it. Faint whispers, soft, indistinct murmurs coming from somewhere near the cart. Sarah froze. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the area around her. There was no one in sight, just rows of shelves stocked with cereal boxes, canned goods, and cleaning supplies. Yet the whispers grew louder, almost taunting her. Suddenly, the cart stopped moving. For a moment, everything went eerily silent. Then, without warning, it jerked forward again. But this time faster, as if propelled by an invisible force. Sarah's eyes widened in terror as the cart sped straight toward her register. "What the hell?" she shouted, stumbling backward. The cart swerved past her, narrowly missing her legs, before zooming down the next aisle. Heart pounding, Sarah bolted after it, determined to figure out what was going on. But the cart seemed to have a mind of its own. It darted between shelves, forcing her to chase it deeper into the labyrinthine store. Panic set in as the cart picked up even more speed, weaving unpredictably like it was alive. Finally, Sarah managed to duck into the employee break room and slammed the door shut behind her. Breathing heavily, she locked the deadbolt and pressed her back against the cold metal door. For a few seconds, all she could hear was the sound of her own ragged breathing. Then, she noticed something reflected in the window, a shadowy figure standing just outside the break room. Its silhouette loomed large, distorted, and utterly unnatural. Sarah spun around, but the hallway beyond the glass was empty. Still, the reflection remained, staring directly at her. She screamed and stumbled backward, tripping over a chair and landing hard on the floor. By the time her manager arrived, shaken but determined to investigate, the mysterious cart had vanished. Security footage showed nothing unusual, except for the cart itself, which appeared to move smoothly across the polished linoleum floor, completely unaided. No employees came forward to admit to any pranks. In fact, many claimed they'd felt uneasy that night, sensing an oppressive atmosphere hanging over the store. Over the following weeks, several staff members quit unexpectedly, citing vague reasons like personal issues or needing a change. But those who stayed whispered about the phantom cart. Some swore they'd seen it roaming the aisles during their shifts, always appearing when the store was quietest. Others refused to work alone after dark, convinced that whatever controlled the cart was still watching, waiting. But that's not all. Another Walmart location became infamous for an even stranger encounter, one involving mannequins that moved when no one was looking. Story number 2, the mannequin that moved. It was a typical evening at a suburban Walmart, the kind of store that seemed ordinary on the surface, but had its fair share of strange rumors. One of the most talked about features of this particular location was the mannequin display near the clothing section. The lifelike figures were often rearranged to match seasonal themes, but employees had long whispered about how unsettling they felt, like their glassy eyes followed you wherever you went. Mark, a 19-year-old stock boy, had heard the stories but never paid them much attention. He was used to working late shifts and didn't scare easily. That night, his task was simple: reorganize the mannequins for an upcoming sale. It should have been quick and easy work, but as he began moving the stiff plastic figures around, an uneasy feeling crept over him. At first, it was subtle. Mark placed one of the mannequins, a female figure dressed in a red sundress, at the edge of the display. When he turned back moments later to adjust another, he noticed something odd. The mannequin wasn't where he'd left it. He frowned, glancing around. "Did I move it without realizing?" he muttered to himself, shaking off the thought. Fatigue must be getting to him. It had been a long day, but as he continued working, the sensation grew stronger, like someone or something was watching him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He spun around, scanning the dimly lit aisle. Nothing moved, just rows of clothes racks and the silent, unmoving mannequins. Still, the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Then it happened. As Mark bent down to pick up a fallen hanger, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye. Slowly, dreadfully, he straightened up and turned around. His breath hitched in his throat. Standing directly behind him, close enough to touch, was one of the mannequins. Its blank face stared right at him, its head tilted slightly to the side as if studying him. "No way," Mark whispered, stumbling backward. His heart raced as he tried to rationalize what he was seeing. Mannequins don't move. They can't move. But this one had. And now, as he looked past it, he realized the others weren't where they were supposed to be either. They were closer, surrounding him. Panic surged through him, and he bolted toward the main aisle, desperate to escape. But as he reached the end of the row, more mannequins appeared, blocking his path. Their positions hadn't changed dramatically. They still looked like ordinary displays. But somehow, they formed an impenetrable barrier. Mark's chest tightened as he frantically searched for another exit. Every direction led to more mannequins, their lifeless faces eerily focused on him. His vision blurred with fear, and his legs gave out beneath him. The last thing he remembered was collapsing to the floor, surrounded by those unblinking eyes. When Mark's coworkers found him the next morning, he was unconscious near the display, pale and trembling. At first, they assumed he'd fainted from exhaustion or dehydration. But when they reviewed the security footage, things took a darker turn. The cameras showed Mark entering the clothing section alone. No one else came in or out during the entire incident. Yet as they watched, the mannequins seemed to shift positions on their own. One moment, they were stationary. The next, they were inches closer to Mark. By the time he collapsed, the figures had completely encircled him. Employees who saw the footage refused to go near the display after hours. Some even claimed the mannequins' poses changed overnight, despite no one touching them. Eventually, management decided to remove the display altogether, citing safety concerns. But the rumors lingered, spreading among staff and customers alike. If that didn't send chills down your spine, wait till you hear about the cursed toy aisle. Story number 3, the cursed toy aisle. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon when Lisa visited her local Walmart to pick out a birthday gift for her 6-year-old son, Ethan. The toy aisle was bustling with families, kids tugging at their parents' sleeves as they pointed excitedly at action figures, puzzles, and plush animals. But something about this particular Walmart had always felt off. There were whispers among regular shoppers that the toys here weren't quite normal. Some claimed certain items carried an unsettling energy, while others swore they'd seen things move on their own in the dead of night. Lisa didn't believe in such nonsense until she picked up the bear. It was sitting inconspicuously on the shelf, tucked between a race car set and a box of Lego bricks. A simple stuffed animal, soft and brown, with button eyes that seemed to glimmer under the fluorescent lights. Something about it caught Lisa's attention, though she couldn't say why. As soon as her fingers brushed against its fur, a cold shiver ran down her spine. She hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone else noticed anything strange. Nothing, just the usual hum of shopping carts and distant chatter. Ethan will love this, she told herself firmly, shaking off the unease. After all, what harm could a harmless teddy bear do? The trouble started almost immediately after they brought it home. At first, it was small things. Ethan talking to himself more than usual, giggling at nothing, or staring blankly into corners of the room. When Lisa asked who he was talking to, he'd reply casually, "My new friend." "What new friend?" she'd ask, but he'd just shrug and hug the bear tighter. Then came the sleepless nights. Ethan refused to go to bed unless the bear was beside him, clutching it like a lifeline. He'd toss and turn, muttering incoherently, his face pale and drawn. One evening, Lisa decided to check on him after hearing faint whispers coming from his room. Peering through the crack in the door, she saw him sitting upright in bed, wide-eyed and motionless, holding the bear close to his chest. "Ethan," she called softly, stepping inside. He didn't respond. Instead, a low guttural laugh filled the air. Not from Ethan, but seemingly from the bear itself. Lisa froze, her blood turning to ice. "Leave," a voice rasped, deep and unnatural, emanating directly from the stuffed animal. Lisa screamed, dropping the flashlight she'd been carrying. It clattered to the floor, casting wild shadows across the walls. By the time she regained her composure and lunged for the bear, Ethan had fallen back asleep, breathing heavily. The bear lay silent once again, its button eyes gleaming innocently in the moonlight. Desperate for answers, Lisa returned to Walmart the very next morning, the cursed bear clutched tightly in her hands. She marched straight to customer service, demanding to speak to a manager. "I don't care what you have to do, just take this thing back," she pleaded, thrusting the bear onto the counter. The manager raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Ma'am, we can't accept returns without a receipt." "It's not about the money," Lisa interrupted, her voice trembling. "That thing, it talks. It said things to me. My son hasn't slept properly since we got it." To her surprise, the manager's expression shifted. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "You're not the first person to complain about that bear," he admitted reluctantly. "We've had other customers report unusual behavior. Toys moving on their own, voices coming from nowhere. We thought it was just superstition, but..." He trailed off, glancing nervously toward the toy aisle. Lisa felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "What are you saying?" "We pulled the entire section last week," the manager confessed. "Too many complaints. Corporate shut it down indefinitely. Whatever's going on, we don't want any part of it." As Lisa left the store, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. Back home, Ethan seemed fine, at least for now, but Lisa couldn't help wondering, what if the damage was already done? Still skeptical? This next story might change your mind forever. Story number 4, the disappearing employee. It was the peak of the holiday season, and the Walmart in downtown Chicago was bustling with activity. Shoppers filled every aisle, their carts overflowing with gifts, decorations, and last-minute essentials. Among the chaos stood Kevin, a 21-year-old college student who had just started his first job at the store. He was excited about his new role, especially since he'd been assigned to work the overnight shift, a quieter time when the store wasn't overrun with customers. Kevin's manager assured him it would be an easy night. Just do some inventory checks, restock a few shelves, and you'll be out of here before sunrise, she said with a smile. Little did Kevin know, this would be the last shift anyone would ever see him work. The clock struck 2:30 a.m., and most of the staff had retreated to the break room for a quick snack. Kevin, however, stayed busy in the electronics section, scanning barcodes and jotting down notes on his clipboard. It was eerily quiet now, the hum of the fluorescent lights replaced by the occasional creak of the building settling. Suddenly, Kevin's radio crackled to life. "Hey boss," he called hesitantly. "I think I need some help over here. There's something weird going on." Static filled the line for a moment before his voice returned, shaky and unsure. "I can't find these items anywhere. They're not where they're supposed to." His words cut off abruptly, replaced by a burst of static that sent chills down the spine of everyone listening. The manager grabbed her own radio, pressing the talk button repeatedly. "Kevin? Kevin, come in. Are you okay?" Silence. Concerned, the manager rounded up two other employees and headed toward the electronics section. When they arrived, Kevin was nowhere to be found. His clipboard lay abandoned on the floor, pages fluttering slightly as if disturbed moments ago. "Kevin!" one of the co-workers shouted, their voice echoing through the empty aisles. No response. Panic began to set in as they split up to search the store. Every corner, every aisle, even the bathrooms were checked thoroughly, but there was no sign of him. It was as if Kevin had vanished into thin air. Desperate for answers, the manager reviewed the security footage from the cameras positioned throughout the store. What they saw left them speechless. The grainy black and white video showed Kevin walking calmly toward the back of the store, holding his clipboard. He paused briefly outside the massive industrial freezer used to store perishable goods. Then, without hesitation, he opened the heavy metal door and stepped inside. The camera angle didn't allow them to see what happened next. But one thing was certain: no one else entered or exited the freezer after Kevin. And yet, when the team rushed to check it, the space was completely empty. The temperature gauge read well below freezing, frost coating the walls and shelves. But there was no trace of Kevin, or any evidence that he'd been there at all. Days passed, and the mystery only deepened. Police were called in, but their investigation turned up nothing. Kevin's family was devastated, clinging to hope that he might still be found alive. Then nearly a week later, another employee made a chilling discovery. Taped to the front of the freezer door was Kevin's name tag, encased in a thick layer of frost. Someone or something had placed it there deliberately, almost as a warning. Employees refused to go near the freezer after that. Some claimed they heard faint knocking coming from inside, even though the door remained firmly shut. Others reported seeing Kevin's shadow reflected in the glass windows late at night, standing motionless among the frozen goods. Despite numerous attempts to explain what happened, Kevin's disappearance remains unsolved to this day. The freezer was eventually decommissioned, its contents relocated to another part of the store. But the memory of that night lingers, haunting those who dare to speak of it. And now brace yourself for the final and most terrifying story of all.